All right, welcome to the January 11th school budget hearing. I would like to call the hearing to order with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, everybody have your colored sheets, blue, yellow, and orange. You should have it. This is good. From what I understand, this is going to be a little bit of a joint effort, Christine, as we go through this. I know some of this information is kind of last minute, guys, but if we'll go through it. If you have any questions, we'll go ahead. So if you guys would like to start presenting, that would be great. So Nathan, go ahead and take the mic.
Hey, folks, thank you very much. Nathan Lunny, Chair of the School Board. Wanted to thank you very much for all of the support. I want to validate what Dave just said and apologize that all of the things can't happen as fast as we want, but we are very close to naming a new superintendent of schools who will join us in July and certainly have an impact in advance. There has been so much work going on, and we appreciate the support that this this committee has shown through our rep and to the previous reps over the last few months. Recognize and appreciate that some of this information is new to you tonight, but we certainly hope that we can answer all your questions. And I'll leave it at that and ask Christine if she could start by introducing the first couple of items.
Thanks, Nathan.
Good evening. First of all, I'd just like to apologize to the audience that my back's going to be turned to as I address the Budget Committee this evening. So, good evening to you all. The first article, Article 1, is to announce the officers of the school district. This year, we have a moderator for 1 year, we have a district clerk for 1 year, a treasurer for 1 year, and we have 2 school board members, each for 3 years. So those you will see on the ballot as Article 1 in March. Article 2 is the operating budget. The total operating budget is a composite of 3 funds. We have a general fund, a food service fund, and the federal funds. The table below shows the amount of each of the funds that we have requested, and it also shows the default amount. The FY17 operating budget is $16,847,926. The default budget is $16,895,184. The food service program is a self-sufficient district program with expenses offset by equal amount in revenue from sales and from federal reimbursement. The district's expenses for Title I, Title II, and some special education positions are also offset by equal amounts of federal grant revenues. The school board proposed a fiscal year 2017 operating budget of $16,062,526, which represents about 0.5% of a decrease over last year's operating budget. This is a level program budget, which includes the request to increase a part-time music teacher at the junior high school level to a full-time position. And it also has earmarked about $50,000 for a facilities director. That facilities director will continue to be an ongoing discussion. That position could look to be something as part-time, full-time, contracted services. It could be a variety of things. We've just earmarked those funds for a placeholder at this time. In addition, we are in the final year of a teacher's contract. Therefore, the teacher's agreement remains status quo until a successor agreement is reached and approved by the voters. And you will see that as Article 3 coming up. So we'll talk a little bit about that later. Some of the factors that are driving the FY17 decrease, one of the larger factors is the fact that we remain status quo until a new contract is reached with the teachers. The second is our out-of-district tuition for special education is significantly going down due to we have aged-out students and students who are no longer in the district, as well as charter school services. We have a charter school student who is aged out. As you all are seeing at home, fuel oil has significantly dropped, so we're all seeing that. It's nice to have that in our pockets right now. And then the last one is the severance payments. We have fewer teachers that we know about that are preparing to retire and separate from the district. If you'd flip that page over on page 2, I'm just going to talk a little bit more about what the budget represents. So on the right-hand side, you can see that there is a table that just breaks down by all the objects, the salaries and the benefits, contracted services, and so forth going down. So you can see how the operating budget is made up, and then you can see that there is about a 0.5% decrease to the operating budget. Salaries for classified staff are set to the district's pay scale that we have, and there was no change in the pay scale, so everybody will just advance their step if applicable. And a sum of $28,084 will be provided again, that was level funded, for negotiations for performance and equity raises for the 19 professional staff members that we have in the district. Health insurance rates through Cigna increased 10.9%. So that was almost double than what we had last year. And staff is eligible to participate in a buyback as an incentive, and if they do participate in that, you get a buyback of $1,500 for a single plan, $2,000 for a two-person, and $3,000 for a family plan. Employer contributions to the New Hampshire retirement system remain status quo. There are 2-year rate setting, so we will see a rate change, if anything, next year. FY18, I should say, not 17. So those remain at the 15.67 for certified staff and 11.17 for classified staff. The junior senior high school, as I mentioned earlier, we increased a part-time music teacher to a full-time due to keep up with the demands of chorus and band and music. The budget also includes the $50,000 for the facilities director to keep us moving ahead with facilities needs as we've started. One other comment I'd like to bring you to is to the blue page. This is the tax impact for all the warrant articles. Shall they all be approved? You can see. One of the things I'll just mention real quick is this is a comparison of the details about the appropriations and revenues. We completed the FY15, which was this past June, with a fund balance of $493,536, which reduced our taxes for the 2015 year. The difference between the FY16 and the FY17 general fund budget is about $82,000 decrease. But the tax impact is a 2-cent increase. The increase in the tax rate is due to the decrease in expenses in the FY17 budget not being enough to balance out the predicted decreases in revenues as well. So that's why you'll see, even though our budget is going down, we're still increasing in a tax rate of 2 cents. The increase in this difference between the tax rate, like I said, of 15 of what you're currently paying now, which your tax rate right now is $17.87, and which includes all the warrant articles that were passed in 2015. And then the estimated FY17 operating budget is based on the total operating budget without any warrant articles. So that's how you can see, if you look at my chart below, you can see what the FY16 approved. At the very bottom, you'll see the $17.87. The requested amount is the $16,847,926. Again, that's a decrease of $82,000 roughly from prior year. The revenues is $1,473,400, which is down about the $93,000. So you can see the total raise in taxes is actually up $10,800. So that's how you get the 2-cent increase into the tax rate. And so if all articles below, which we'll get into shortly, you can see what that tax rate increase will be. Same thing, same exercise on the default budget as well. Are there any questions that I can answer about the operating budget? No? Okay.
You're back.
I'm back. Want to talk about Article number 3, the collective bargaining agreement with the Teachers Association. This is something you haven't heard about yet, I don't believe. So tell me not to talk quickly and ask me questions on the fly, if you like. We negotiated another item that we dealt with this fall. We negotiated the collective bargaining agreement, sat at the table, and we started a conversation that started this way. And you folks know this, a lot of you have seen this and dealt with this, and we can't fix this overnight, but let me just tell you what we started with. We started with the conversation this way. Newmarket's starting pay for teachers ranks in the state of New Hampshire 124th out of 159. The basic M1, first step, under the current agreement, pays new teachers coming out of a college preparatory program, student teaching, et cetera, starts them at $35,815. 14 of the top 20 starting districts in the state, 14 out of 20, are all right here in the Seacoast. They're the Portsmouths and the Exeters and the Stratums and the Ryes and the Hamptons. And we don't suggest that we should try to be the Portsmouth or the Ryes or the Stratums or the Exeters or the Hamptons. But 14 out of the top 20 are right here in the Seacoast competing for the same people that we are. And their starting pay runs somewhere between, for the M, step one, right out of college, somewhere between $45,000 and $52,000, a $10,000 to $17,000 delta between where we start and where they start. And so you sit with your people, our people across the table, and remind yourself that what you're here to do is to negotiate a fair wage and fair terms and conditions for employment. And I tell you that because one of the things that we had to say again and again was, we understand. And one of the other statements that was made or concerns that was expressed and has been before is that the district has taken efforts to try to chase competitiveness with its administrative ranks, with its support staff ranks, its classified staff, but in a unionized environment. It's only through the negotiations that we can see changes made to make any gains or any competitiveness gained with regard to our teacher compensation. And so we went into negotiations that way. The other thing we went into negotiations facing is different from what we know today, and that is that the Affordable Care Act was directing that by January 1 of 18, high-cost health insurance plans were going to impact the community with excise taxes. And I've heard people suggest that it would be like being a donor town, where money was going to leave the community and go somewhere very nebulous to pay for something very nebulous, and it wasn't going to benefit our staff or our students here. And so the other significant challenge that we went into negotiations facing was a desire to address that concern. Only after our negotiations were complete did the legislature take a swing at addressing that by pushing it off by 2 years. But the reality in law still exists, and so I'll share that with you in just a second. What we've negotiated, I believe your notes will tell you, is that we negotiated a 3-year agreement. It would be from 2016-17 through the 18-19 year. We hope that that does two things. It certainly pushes out by at least a year, maybe longer than what a 2-year deal would have allowed, pushes it out so that we don't negotiate as often at some cost and effort in the course of a 10-year cycle. More importantly, with the new superintendent expected on board July 1st, it gives the superintendent 2 years to sit with an existing agreement, that contract, and identify things that the superintendent might share with the board as priorities to address in another negotiating session. There were some small items that had been previously agreed to by the association and the board in terms of adding a position and changing the pay cycle. No financial impact there, just some cleanup. We addressed a number of language items, including limiting reimbursement for graduate coursework to regionally accredited universities and colleges. There was no language that clarified that. And in an age of quick access to online schooling, we wanted to make sure that the graduate coursework that we were contributing to had met some standard. We identified and changed the language to clarify that course reimbursement was limited by dollar amount and not by credit count. There was a concern about elementary planning periods, that they be well-defined, and we set that. We clarified that observations of teachers ought to be completed by Memorial Day. We clarified how teachers would be placed on the salary scale with language that was more definitive and specific than previously. And given that we are anticipating the near-term retirement of a member of the staff that has been very involved in managing the sick bank that the teachers have, we clarified to some great extent language that will help guide the management of that sick bank into the future, as opposed to it being a continuing practice between the administration and the association. But more specifically concerning the things I talked about a second ago, the language of the agreement will establish a 6-member committee with 3 members each appointed by the board and by the association, who will begin in April and work to explore alternatives and options to try to find lower cost health plans to replace the higher cost health plans. Further than that, there's language that allows now or provides now that should any plan that the district offers according to this collective bargaining agreement become subject to an excise tax of any sort under the Affordable Care Act, that the Teachers Association will agree to add at least one alternative to their list of plans. And further, if teachers elect to keep any high-cost plan that is applicable or has applicable to it an excise tax, that the district's contribution will be lowered by the amount of that tax and the employees increased by the amount of that tax, so that the language that we've proposed protects the taxpayer from ever paying an excise tax against a high-cost health plan. Okay, so to get that, there was a small concession made. There's never enough time. Teachers have a 186-day contract right now that provides for student days as well as additional days, non-contact, where they can do professional development. They also had in the language 7 one-hour meetings throughout the course of the year after school that we have changed now into 2 90-minute professional development sessions that we'll have during the course of the year. And then beyond that, the salary, of course, is the big ticket. The salary provision included in this contract provides for a step increase to those teachers who are in the salary grid, 1.7% movement of the scale, 1.75% movement of the scale in each year of those 3 years. Oh my God, I'm sorry. I'm not looking at my notes. I'm reading from a picture in my head, which is another contract that I negotiated this year. Sorry. Year 1, you guys are looking at the notes and seeing it. Year 1 is 2% here. Salary step for those in the scale, 2% movement of the scale in year 1, which brings a total dollar that will be on the ballot of $249,259. That includes the roll-ups for taxes and retirement costs related to those new dollars, not the base salaries that already exist, but to the increases. And then in years 2 and 3, a 2.8% increase in the scale, as well as a step to those that have it available to them, driving costs that you'll see noted of $154, and then in the third year, $175, again, including the roll-ups. That's the collective bargaining agreement that's before us as Article 3 tonight. Any questions that I can help with?
Dave? So if this gets approved, how does that, you kind of started this off by talking about how unfavorably our starting pay scale compares to our neighbors. How does that change if this is voted in?
It takes a lot to climb into the top. As I said, we're 10 to 17,000 off on the starting pay. So this doesn't get us into the top 100. Off the top, I can't tell you exactly where we would land. Of course, next year, I'm looking at today's contracts, and so the answer would be, depending on what everybody else negotiates next year. But it's certainly, when we look in the region and we see folks that are receiving anywhere between 1.5 to 2.5 or 2.75, it helps. I know that the teachers had a document that I'm not looking at right now that listed a bunch of the regional agreements, some of which are beyond 2.5 and 3%, because of the negotiations and because the Affordable Care Act has been a driving factor, I think, for a lot of school boards who have sat down across from associations. But in this case, it at least makes some ground against a number of them that are in the top 50 or so. It moves the bar, and it brings our starting salaries higher, and it moves them closer to equity. But you can't solve it in 1 year. You can't solve it in one negotiation, and sadly, you really can't solve it in 20 either without wholesale change. And we weren't proposing that at this point, but we were trying to do the best that we could, especially when there were issues like the Affordable Care Act and the Cadillac tax on the table.
All right, thanks.
We compare any differently at other parts of the pay scale besides the starting?
It's easier to pick up the base because of the way the state publishes it, in the aggregate across the range of the associations across the state. Anecdotally, I can say that we are in the same ballpark of 15 to 17 or 18,000 on the top end too, when we top out. There, it's harder to measure because so many districts do different things in terms of longevity and additional add-ons to try to make it not look as bad as it is, I think, sometimes, and also to try to provide for different categories of staff that negotiate those or have special grandfathering, et cetera. So this continues to move us a little bit further up the scale, and we make up some ground, but we're in the same ballgame when we're on the top end of the scale as well. We top out 10 or 15,000 less than those around us.
Okay, thank you.
Questions?
As far as the contract goes, the first year, you're asking for 249, 259 as an above and beyond appropriation. The fiscal year 17, 18, 19, are we going to have another warrant article for above and beyond appropriations, or is
No.
the salaries be
The salaries,
in benefits and all that?
they'll have the 2.8 in the subsequent 2 years will have to be included in the operating budget.
Okay.
You'll see that and the roll-ups of taxes. And this is the phrase they use is Sanbornizing. We have to provide an estimate of what the new cost would look like in each year that we're asking to agree to. So years 2 and 3, those are estimates based upon today's staff.
Okay, thank you.
But because it's year one, we would have to appropriate it this year.
But
and
year
then-
one, you
and
have to
then
raise and appropriate
It goes right
that
into the
amount.
operating budget the
Yep.
following, yeah.
Absolutely.
So what then, I'm feeling a little disconnected that the first year, which has the smallest percentage increase, also has the biggest bottom line increase. What are we assuming for the 17, 18, and the 18, 19 years that's mitigating the impact of the 2.8% increase in both of those years?
If I take you back, it's actually the smallest increase, the first year. Wait, 16, 17 is 249, and then
Okay.
292,
Oh, okay,
296.
so each of these, all right, now I see where you're going, never
And,
mind.
and I think it'd be fair enough to say that as the board considered what they wanted to do, part of what we anticipated was that this ballot would be asking for a lot of things, this warrant. There isn't a capital build, there isn't a capital bond, there isn't a project, there isn't, $1.5 million of architectural fees, but if you go back to this negotiating session when we were working in October, November, we were trying hard, and the Teacher Association was working with us to try to keep as low as possible the financial impacts that we might be asking for in this year, because we thought that that would be expedient given some of the other requests that we might have.
All right, gotcha.
Anyone else?
Article 4?
Article 4.
Article 4 is a technical article that is described in statute that allows for us to continue a good faith effort in working with our teachers. If Article 3, we just discussed, the collective bargaining agreement, should fail passage, Article number 4 is an alternative that, if it's passed by the voters, would allow us to essentially go back and reopen negotiations, come up with new terms, new cost items, and call for a special election to see if we couldn't pass something so that we could have that in place for the new fiscal year. In the absence of that, a no vote by the public on number 3 means no new contract. We're stay put with the terms that existed in the old one. There are no salary increases, no changes, and we lose out on some of the terms that we had worked to negotiate. So Article 4 is simply a fail-safe to allow the public, if it wants to say no to this one, but we can say yes to this one so that you can go back to the table and we can take another swing at it. I don't know that we've done that in every year, but this year it felt like it was a good faith move on behalf of the teachers to ask. Do we do it fairly frequently?
Yeah. I'm going to say, I know the last contract came
We
up.
have,
We
okay.
asked it, yeah.
Thank you. Question?
This may just be a newbie question, but what's the definition of a special meeting?
It would be crafted, I'm sure, however the clerk and the moderator wanted to do so, but it would be another vote. And because we're Senate Bill 2, it would have to be a ballot vote. It might not be it might be a hand-counted ballot vote, it might, you know, it might not be on the machines, they might not go through the same process, but it would be whatever they would prescribe to notice the public, as we would here. I believe, without having done it, I believe there'd have to be a public hearing on those terms, and then there would be a deliberative to consider it the same way.
Correct.
And then we'd actually find a date certain, and they would collect ballots that day, you know, have
Yeah.
people vote again.
The best way I can put it, it's special meeting, the best way is an off-cycle meeting. It's not your typical voting patterns. And if it's something that has to be addressed, like a teacher's contract, or it's off-cycle, because typically we have our vote in March. So if it doesn't pass and we have to go to another meeting, there's a lot of terms and everything that has to be done for a special meeting, and one of them is you have to have a warrant that can call for it. And then we have to go through all the steps that we would with this one, we would have to do for the special meeting as well.
Yeah, the key for me was all the steps. That's what I wanted to
Yeah.
get to. And
Yes.
you
We talked
answered.
about having special meeting once before, and we, you know, became clear after we did all the research for another purpose that you just can't get there from here.
Okay.
This is one of those enabling legislation, enabling laws that makes it possible to do that on behalf of something like a collective bargaining agreement, so.
Anything else?
Questions?
Good.
Mike, are you gonna help, will you speak to numbers 5 and 6, maybe?
5 and 6.
Thank you very much.
Proposed article number 5 is what it says it is. It's a land swap. I'd like to thank Skip Manso for reaching out to Lane Cheney and the Durrell Woods Association for this. If you look on the drawing on page 3, you'll see a parcel labeled Durrell. That's directly in back of the Newmarket Elementary School. The border of that runs right along the back access road. I don't know if anybody's ever driven out back there. And then it goes over, there's a basketball court on the right, and, obviously the playground's over there as well. And over to the left, it's, you can see it written in there, it's called swampland. Yeah, the school district owns that swampland right now. It's of no utility to the school district, but it is potentially to the Durrell Woods Association. They have to have so much open space, okay? And so they can give us the land right behind the school in exchange for the swampland, and they still meet their open space requirements for a condominium association, a homeowners association. This is at no cost to the district other than the legal cost of drafting up the land swap and doing a lot line adjustment. What does Durrell give us? Well, it's a lot of ledge right now. I hiked it along with Skip Manso and Mark Fillion just before the snowstorm, and it's a lot of rock. So it's not like we could just develop the whole thing without a substantial cost. What you could do potentially is you could move the access road a little bit feasibly along the back if you had to. But it's really, it's an overused term, no-brainer, but this is land we can potentially use versus land that we couldn't possibly use because it's wetlands. So, so that it makes total sense. It's about 4 acres, the Durrell parcel, and the swampland's a little under 3. This will apply to the next article as well. Both our educational consultant, Mark Joyce, and our architect highly recommend that, the district acquire properties along both the junior, senior high and Newmarket Elementary if they come up. They're limited lots. They're landlocked. There's really nothing else of value other than the next parcel I'll talk to you about. So that's that. I don't know if there are any questions before I move on. Dan?
Assume we've done just the basic due diligence. There's nothing hidden in this, no toxic waste dump, no.
No, I mean, yeah, no.
I just want to ask the question.
Yeah, it's a fair question. It's a good question, yeah. No, there's nothing out there. That work's been done years ago.
Okay.
It's land that was never used. If you go out there, literally, it's like a moonscape. It's all rock.
It's all rock, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's all exposed rock, so there's nothing out there. So, moving on to the next article. Yeah, go.
Roughly 4 acres of land, what's the tax impact on the property that Durrell Association currently owns? Because that will obviously impact the town side, you wouldn't be paying those taxes anymore as far as Durrell Association.
The Durrell Association, I don't know, Blue. I don't know the answer to that. It's in open space. I'm not sure what that answer
He
is.
would be paying on all the swampland, conversely. So
Yeah.
the thought is that one
But
would
developable land
replace the
is
other.
worth a little bit more than swampland. That's why the town will be losing a revenue, and
A little bit.
a little bit of revenue. Obviously, it's, like you said, a no-brainer. I'm just trying to
Yeah, I
find out exactly what it is.
I don't know, Blue. All I can say is, having been out there, theoretically, I think it would be more economical to develop the swamp than it would be to blast all that rock. It's like 50 feet high.
My other question is does Durrell Woods and the school district need to go in front of the town for zoning, or, and go in front of the district, the zoning boards and planning boards to make sure that this land can be developed anyways, if the district was to get it?
Yeah, our lawyers have said no. Okay, it's simply a land swap. We're not making a change in use fundamentally.
Well, it's going from technically private land to public land, correct?
Part of it is, and part of it's going over to, back to the association. So, I mean, it's like an even exchange. There's no,
Right, no, what I'm asking is, I guess, did we go in front of the zoning board to make sure that if the swap happens at the Durrell Association property, that the Newmarket School District could eventually want to expand on it? Is there any limitations currently on that property?
we haven't gotten that far yet, but I'd rather own it and do it than not, because we know we can't do anything with a swamp,
Or
so.
we swap and
Yeah,
nothing
and-
can ever
and-
happen to it?
Right, and if we needed a variance or something down,
Sure,
we haven't even
yeah.
gotten that far, but if we
Okay.
needed it, we could cross that bridge, I suppose. Any other questions? All right, moving on to Article 6. This is a proposed land purchase. I would just refer to the same drawing that we were just looking at with the Durrell property. If you look over to the right, Lot 53 is the McGrath property. The district proposes purchasing that property. I don't know if people are familiar with it, but let me orient you. If again, we're looking at the back of the school, the small open part between 55 and 54 that juts out is the current exit for the school out onto Route 152. And there's an apartment building on Lot 54, and then next to that is the McGrath property. McGrath runs essentially the whole right-hand length of the elementary school property, right alongside the playground, and it's also runs back on that Durrell piece. It's up for sale. It's a little over 2 acres, and what that potentially does is it gives the school the ability to have an access road. Currently, all the buses and the staff and the parents drop off out in front of the school, and if anybody's been through that process, it's pretty congested. It's not ideal. They improved upon it a little bit this year with cones, but it's very much a temporary fix. It's still not ideal. You basically have everybody funneling into the front of that school at the same time. It's a dangerous and it's a congested situation. What this potentially does is allows us to have an access road, and this is just high level at this point, because we don't know ultimately what we're going to do over there. We're still in the process of vetting everything with the architect, but this is the only contiguous property that would allow us to do another access road right out onto 152. It would also allow us to get rid of that part of the access road that runs between the building and the playground, which isn't ideal either. If you have a parent or a delivery truck or somebody else coming through there, God forbid there's any kids crossing and there's an accident. This would avoid that potentially altogether, so there wouldn't be a road in between the playground and the school. There's multiple possibilities. If you didn't put an access road out there, you could expand the playground, which is sort of on a limited, narrow, thin strip as it is now. And I know it's fluid, Nate, but we were working on a purchase and sale agreement with the owner. Got it, as of the other night, and anticipating questions about this. We haven't done an inspection yet, but that's all part of the purchase and sale agreement. We're going to have a period of time to do our due diligence to make sure there's no underground storage tanks. Not that we expect that, or any liability to the district on that property.
We got 90 days. There was,
Yeah.
if that's, I mean, when you deal with somebody that, in a basic resident, a normal residential, they were really talking 10 days, so it took some work. But we've got 90 days to do all the due diligence, I mean, it's included title search and stuff.
Right. And so the purchase price is a little under, it's in the warrant article, the proposed purchase price, it's 166
69,610.
in change, yeah, 169 in change. And part of that would be paid for through the School Facilities Capital Reserve Fund, for about $71,000. Again, this is one of these opportunities that if the school passes by, you may not see it again. You can always use eminent domain, but that's the last resort, and it's usually pay the most for a piece of property by doing that. I suspect if we didn't get it, somebody else is going to scoop it up and, develop it. So, again, our architect and Dr. Joyce had recommended that we, purchase this property if it became available. That's all I have. Any questions? Yeah.
So the market price is somewhere around 250,000, is that correct?
They had it originally listed, Craig, for 214, I think, or something around there.
But it looks like you're taking out the 169 and then another 71.
No, 169 is the total appropriation. 71 will come out of the trust, and then the balance of 98 is what we'll have to raise. So the total payment is 169. It's appraised, I think, for tax purposes on the town's books at 162.4. And they went out at 214, something like that, 214.9, I think, is where they started. And our calculation that got us to 169 was based upon, well, yeah, we weren't happy to be there, but it was based upon a calculation of some premium being placed on the property for our use because we have the potential for some significant use. So we were able to justify some premium on the appraised value, but we couldn't go anywhere close to what they thought the asking price should be. The structures are not going to be of any value to us. It's really just the land itself.
I think lot 56 or 57 is also for sale. Is that something that the school board was interested or considered looking at?
Oh, yeah, the one on the corner. Yeah, Craig, that was, but I think the listing price on that was up around 250 or 260. And it's just it's a fair question, but it's a small lot. Wouldn't really give us much of anything because we already have that. Might give us some parking spaces, but those would be expensive parking spaces because we already have an exit right there.
So I guess the question that I have is, so the asking price is the 169.6, but the one thing we haven't factored in is the cost to remediate the land for whatever we decide to do. So this is just flat out buy the property.
Yep.
And then whatever we do with it would have to come at a later time.
Correct.
Because the question I'm asking is, I'm going to put this as nicely as we already own a very expensive parking lot across the street. So it makes complete sense that it's right next to the school, but is the access road the only thing we're thinking about for this property, or is it for possible, I mean, I know that when we talk about facilities, it's not just the high school, it's also the elementary. Does this give us a ability to do whatever we need to do at the elementary as well, better suited, or are we still just thinking more access road for this property?
Yeah, it does, because it essentially allows us to move everything over. I mean, it doesn't have to be an access road. This is just, we're early on in the process. And if anybody watched that meeting, and I think it was about a month ago, where Ingrid went through just a high-level drawing of an access road, that's just one possible use. It's a really nice piece of upland. It's flat. It's a field as is. It potentially has a recreational purpose too if it's not used for an access road. But here's the thing, and I don't want to repeat myself, but if we lose this opportunity to buy this piece of property, and these things never come up, when you want them to, they came up now for sale. The last time it was for sale was in 1923, and the owners really wanted the school district to get it. They didn't give it away to us, or they haven't given it away to us, but there's no other piece of land, of developable land that's akin to it. And so, all those lots in front are small, they have houses on them. So unless you could acquire them all, they wouldn't really make much of a difference. So it is you know, when I talked to Ingrid about this, her eyes lit up. She was very excited because she could see the possibilities. Because I think before that she was kind of like, what can we do with this? Because we're already short right now about 50 spaces at the elementary school, 50 parking spaces. If anybody's ever parked there during an event, sometimes you need to park way up Durrell Drive. And on a typical day without an event, it's packed. You've got people making their own parking spaces. So there are many potential uses. Jeff?
What happens if Article 6 passes and you can't complete the sale for any reason?
Then you mean for like the inspection fails?
Whatever.
Yeah.
They back out, doesn't matter why. But
Yeah.
what happens to the authorization of withdrawal and whatnot?
Doesn't happen.
Then it doesn't happen, because that's like a precondition, you know?
Can't happen.
It's a condition precedent. We would need to do our due diligence. It would have to pass, and only then, once the school board's approved it, you know, approve the inspection or whatever, only then could we withdraw the money. Yep. This isn't carte blanche. You can withdraw it no matter what happens with a P&S. It's totally conditioned on the P&S closing.
I'm gonna head off a question by Blue for a second. It's about $5,000 tax bill. But my bigger point is, I wonder if the article could be written a little differently based on negotiations, as you said, and inspections and that sort of thing, to raise and appropriate the sum not to exceed.
Jeez.
Not to exceed 169,610. Would that be okay to do? Again, based on expression, because we may not spend that, who knows, if something comes in,
Sure.
maybe they'll want to give it to, maybe whatever. But I think it would be more comfortable to not exceed that.
That was my next question, is
Okay.
the fees and inspection and stuff like that. I mean, are there going to be additional costs above this that we could experience? I mean, I understand, you know, Mike, to your point, why we go after this land. It makes complete sense. You know, you combine that and the Durrell property, I mean, it looks like a really nice expansion, other than having to blow up a lot of rock. You know, it's a lot of, the spaces kind of add quite a bit to the back and the side. We're talking almost 6 acres of land that are right on the side of the school.
Mm-hmm.
But are we looking at any, I mean, to your point, Amy, if we say not to exceed, if we experience any unanticipated costs that never happen when we're buying a house?
Well, but we don't want this for the house anyway. I mean, I
Right. Well, no, but I'm just
understand
saying
that. So
if
I
we
think
could
I think
experience
it would be
anything in the
limited
ground.
there.
Right.
And again, as either Mike or Nathan said, this is for the purchase only. We understand we may have some abatement, we may have something. That is not being addressed in this warrant article. So I'd be a lot more comfortable, and I think it will fly a lot better if that 169 could be a not to exceed.
I think that's fair, because, you know, to your point, Amy, I don't think it's going to, we're not going to do anything with it between now and next March. You know, because next March is the earliest we'd propose, well, is when we will propose a building solution. Okay, so this may be part of that. We've been told that it may cost anywhere between $15,000 and $25,000 to demolish the buildings. We've also been told anecdotally that, you know, there's the timber frame barn building, somebody would take that for free, which is part of that figure because of the timber frame. But we're not talking in all events a massive expense. We don't anticipate this was ever a gas station.
Well,
You know,
we went through
yeah.
it with Carpenter too, and
Yeah.
Yes.
we have the cost for that. So I think that's a reasonable gauge going forward, but anyway.
This was brought up when we bought the expensive parking lot across from the current school. Are we allowed to use, or are you allowed to use $71,400 out of the expansion of school facilities capital reserve fund to purchase land?
Yes.
You're not expanding the school facility, you're purchasing land. Throwing it out, I'm just asking the question. Everybody's, just want to make sure. Okay.
I don't know how well Mike's picked that up.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I mean, I think Christine and I are looking and laughing and agreeing, the superintendent's agreeing. It's, it abuts the property, it does, it's, you know, it's expanding on that property. It's consistent with the purpose
Facilities means-
of that trust. I want to go back, because I think one nuance, I think that we ought to talk to the district lawyer and say, help us with the language. I think that they're going to come back, and it might just be the Department of Revenue who will say, you must have a sum certain. So when we say raise and appropriate the sum of, they may not like a sum not to exceed. But if the point is, let me try this, if they tell us that and we have to raise and appropriate the sum of 169,610 for the purchase of property not greater than that, at that price, or not to exceed that price, is that what we're looking at?
However, yes, however the wording,
So, because I don't know if they'll let us change the first part of that sentence, but we can add not to exceed that purchase price, or not to exceed that value, or not to exceed that price. And we should do that in advance of posting. That way it can be up, and it can be seen that way. And then if there's any additional.
I think it will make it more comfortable.
I
If for
appreciate
some
it. I
reason,
think you're right.
the McGraths turn around and say, hey, we'd like to sell it for 125,000, I think
We ought to
this
be
will
able to,
help this
right.
flood, correct.
I agree. So let's speak to that. And then the deliberative, we could change it again if we knew something even more important or more pertinent than what we know now.
The biggest thing that I just want to make sure is that we can lower that amount at the deliberative, but I don't know if you can increase that amount, correct?
Back to Blue's question, just as a clarification. The trust fund was originally established as the expansion, and when you originally bought the Carpenter property, you used that fund as well. So I just wanted to make sure that you.
That's why I asked, because I know it was brought up there.
It's the same fund for the same purpose, so we're buying two different parcels, but for the same,
Now, the 71,000, is that all that we have left in that fund?
in some change, in some
Okay,
interest.
I was going to say,
yes.
so it's just that's, all right,
Yeah. We just want to leave it open.
okay. Any other questions on this? Okay. Article 7?
Article 7 would establish a new capital reserve fund for the purpose of funding new construction and the renovation of school buildings, plural, including necessary costs for architectural and engineering plans, and the construction costs for additions and renovations or new facilities for the school district. This article would be funded with any surplus balance up to $150,000 that remains in the 2015-16 operating budget. Let me give you a little bit of background as to why we are where we are. Some of us on the school board had expected 8 months ago that we'd be coming before the citizens with a proposed budget for building or renovating a new school now, in March. Obviously, that is not happening. One of the reasons it did not happen is we were encouraged, and Mike, you can help me on this as well, as Mike's heading up the facilities committee, to make sure that, number one, we addressed all facilities, not just the junior, senior high school. Residents didn't want us coming up next year and saying, okay, we want X million dollars to do the junior high school. So to make sure it was all-inclusive, and also to make sure that we had enough credibility with our numbers to ask voters to accept it. We decided we were a long way from that, so that was not going to happen. We discussed about 4 meetings ago, perhaps coming before the Budget Committee and the voters and asking them for complete architectural and engineering fees, so that once the school options were selected, we could kick it right into gear and get the architects going and the engineers and so forth going. Generally, that's 7 or 8% of project costs. I don't know what the new school renovation project cost is, but assume it's, I don't know, assume it's whatever you want to assume it. Assume it's $15 million. So take 7 or 8% of that. So we'd be coming to you and saying, okay, we want $1.2 million to go ahead and move ahead on engineering and architectural fees. Quite frankly, we didn't feel as though, as a school board, we had the credibility to do that, given our history. What does that mean? What that means is we're slowed down on the project of where a lot of people would like to see a new renovated elementary, junior, senior high, or new building. But quite honestly, if we felt as though if we put together a warrant article for engineering and architectural fees of $1 million something, it wouldn't get passed. So there's another failure. So what we instead are asking for is $150,000 so that we can continue the basic engineering and architectural fees to a point where we can present to the community options. This option is going to cost this amount of dollars. This option is going to cost. This is how big that option is. This is how small this option is. So $150,000 should get us there. We hope in July, August, September,
Yeah, probably summertime, yeah.
summertime, to
Yeah.
have those options available, done. Will they be finished? No, but they'll be the work, we'll have done enough work to present to the community options that you can picture, that you can attach a price to, not a definitive price, but something pretty close. So that's where we came out on this, and that's what we would like to do, is get your support to do that.
If I can just add on to that, Al, just the notion, the board was well-meaning insofar as wanting to move this along and at least considering the warrant article for design fees. There's two phases to it. There's the schematic phase, which is what we're in right now, which is high-level drawings, bird's-eye views. That's the relatively less expensive phase, okay? It's just sort of conceptual. Once you pick what you're going to build, then you go into the design phase, and that's where you do the 6 to 7, or we've heard as high as 9 for other architects, not our architect, fee based on the entire construction cost. So you can run the numbers, and you get the drawings that are stacked this tall, that you know which way the doors swing, which doorknobs you're going to use. It's all the detail. It would take a leap of faith for us before we're even done the due diligence process to ask the public to say, we'll get it right, just give us this money and we'll get it right. We didn't think that would fly, quite frankly, from the feedback we got. We got feedback. There's a lot of trust being built up, but we need to work on the due diligence. The whole idea behind that is it would have put the project a year sooner, okay? Because if we had gotten the fees in this March, you could do the design throughout the summer and fall, do your cost estimates, and then presuming a project vote next March, your drawings are all ready and you can put it out to bid right then and go to work that summer. Okay, so what will happen here is we'll complete the schematic phase, we'll have a cost estimator give us cost estimates on that, and then we'll be ready for a bond vote next March. And presuming that passes, then you'll go into your design phase, and that's when the architect does their magic and gives you your actual build drawings.
So just a kind of chain of events, if this is passed, we'll have $150,000 to do the preliminary work. We'll bring it to the public midsummer, get input from the public as to whether they're inclined to go to A or to B. And there may be a C, I don't know, but probably an A, B, and a C. Next March, we will vote to approve the architectural fees, which will be that 7 to 8% of whatever the community decides to move. And building will begin in 2018. Had we believed that we could get support for the whole architectural engineering firm, it would have been a year earlier. But pragmatically, we just didn't believe that we had the support to do it.
one thing?
Sure.
So just one more thing is, and because I don't know if I heard it, the 150,000 is intended to come out of the operating surplus at
Right.
the end of this year. And none of those articles you've seen traditionally, raising dollars for the special ed trust or this technology trust or any of those other trusts, we've taken all of those off. We're not putting those on this year so that this replaces that.
And just one more, in terms, I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but if we had proposed architectural design fees, the million plus, and it didn't get approved, New Hampshire has this hammer clause. Yeah, this no means no, so we'd be shut down entirely, essentially, from contributing money towards a design effort for that until the next vote. So that was a consideration too. We're making great progress, we really are. I mean, we have to do some improvement on getting the word out, quite frankly, so people really know what's been done so far. We've had, Dr. Joyce come in and give an excellent report. I don't know if people have had an opportunity to review that. But I sense a lot of buy-in to that, and I think that's what we're trying to achieve first and foremost, is buy-in to the program and getting the facts out there. That's, the facilities committee is a balanced committee. It's not people from one side of the issue or people from the other. We're checking on each other, and it's funny because at one point, I won't name names, but some of those on the facility committee were sort of flipping sides and saying, yes, let's do that vote for the design fees. And then there were some of us who you would think would be supporting, kind of said, whoa, wait a minute. We don't want to lose credibility here. So we got a good group there, and a great architect. And I'm really looking forward to having our superintendent come aboard, and also help us with the process and getting a public input, so we can arrive at a recommendation for next year. It's not that long. It's not that far away. It'll come quick.
We need to do a much better job communicating with the community. One of the things, it's been said before, but get a hold of the Dr. Joyce report. In that Dr. Joyce report, it will tell you what we need for space in a very discernible and very clear way. It's significantly less than what was talked about earlier. But it's well worth the read. Any questions?
Why a new fund? Why not use the dual-purpose fund?
Nate perhaps can answer. I'll give you a shot at it.
I understand,
Yeah.
I understand, but it exists already. Here's where I'm going with this out. That fund would cover these things, whether you raise a surplus balance of 150,000, whatever it is, whether you put it in the dual-purpose fund, paraphrasing, or whether you put it in this new fund. My concern is this. You've tied two actions to one warrant article. So if I were to, for instance, say, I'm not for a new fund, I'm going to vote no, which means you potentially are losing out on the 150 as well. So I think where I'm going is either changing this to be the dual-purpose fund, which already exists, and making this warrant article for one purpose, or splitting it into Article 7 and Article 8.
I get you. Nate?
I think this is looking at sinking your own battleship, and
Well,
I'm not going to weigh in on one side or the other with that, but I'm trying to help you get past what you say you need to get
Your
past.
point is well taken.
Okay.
The other fund that we could take this from, and I'm not going to quote it exactly, but was the new school in fire, life safety,
But it's really not there anymore.
but that's what it's called.
And that's what it's going to say.
Correct.
And that's what it's going to say. And people are going to say, wait a minute, new school? Where did you come up with that? Fire, life, safety? I thought we already took care of that.
I understood that, and I watched
So
that at the meeting, so I
that
agree
was
in
a-
that.
that
But
was
that's
our-
why I'm asking about dual purpose, is just saying, look, why don't you just keep it simple there?
The article could not say raise and appropriate 150 from the surplus to the dual purpose fund. Dual purpose isn't a name that the lawyer will let us use.
The big name of the
And the-
fund,
And the big name has
the
all those other
fund
implications that we
called-
think will scare people away.
my
So we
view is
thought
that
this
the
was an
fund
attempt to try to
called
describe-
A, B, C, pink, blue, whatever, the whole name, I know that that is cumbersome, but it does already exist. Your purpose here is to have funds for these drawings, and my concern is that in trying to not have people go, oh my God, it's not fire, life, safety, and vote it down, I think we've gone too far the other way, and I think you've got two ways that this could fail right now. So my personal view is that it makes it simpler, saying if you want the 150, get the 150, and that is a really long name in there, construction of school, I understand that. But I think that the fund already exists, and I think we're trying to do too much with this one warrant
You're
article. is
trying
all.
to solve that problem, there's no question about it.
I understand.
And again, I can't remember the thing in its entirety, but as I said at the school board meeting, I wouldn't have voted for it, because it says fire and life safety in new school. We said, okay, how do we get around this? And the only way we could get around it was to establish a new fund for it.
Well, and that was my question,
Yeah.
because you have the expansion of school facilities, you have the repair and maintenance of school
Yep.
facilities, you have the dual purpose, and then
Yep.
now you're creating this one. So we
Yep.
essentially have, I totally understand what you're doing, but here we go with our fourth name of something to raise money for, to Amy's point, almost the exact,
Well, again,
a
it's,
similar purpose. It's
Yeah.
not the exact same purpose.
and again, understand
Yeah,
it's not
in trying to
raising money,
clear it, I
it's
think we're muddying it
using
again.
from the surplus.
So,
Which could be actually be used to bring back down taxes. So you are
Yes.
using money.
Yes,
We've already been taxed on it, just remember that.
absolutely correct.
I
Yes.
actually he and I had the same talk of why we had to change the title. And if you listen to what Al has to say, he's not telling you he's gonna vote no because he's voting no. He's voting no because of what the title says on the warrant article.
Let me read it to you.
Yes, that was.
Shall the school district vote, this is under the proper name of the trust fund.
This is what it would have been had
This
we
is
not
what it would have
proposed
been.
this.
You said.
Shall the school district vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $150,000 of any
up to.
June 30, 2016 fund balance surplus to be added to the construction of new school building, renovation of existing school buildings for fire and life safety code compliance, capital reserve fund, whatever. I read that, and it was at that point I said, people can't understand what it
But
means.
it's not accurate to what, if I may, Al,
Go ahead.
it's not accurate to what we would propose this money to be, and I don't want to get hung up on this. I mean, I think the real substance here is the 150. You know, by creating another fund, I'm not really understanding a concern by just creating the fund by name, whether you put 150 in this or that other fund with a long title, what difference does it make?
Because we're voting on two things in one warrant article.
Would it not be easier to change one word in the name of that dual-purpose fund? And it would be, you can, at the deliberative session, you can actually change the title, which could be brought upon by a citizen who could be on the school board, I guess. Repeat it again for me, I'm sorry. It's long, I understand.
Remove fire and life safety?
Just the name of I think it's one, instead of for, it's or, between renovation or fire and life, because we could actually have some fire and life safeties come up in the future.
But I don't think the name would change unless, we could put up a warrant article that would seek to change the name, but then
Presents
that name doesn't stick until after it's voted.
Correct.
Correct.
You're still failing on two
It
counts.
just seems like the town just went through getting rid of funds, and now the school is asking for more funds, and I understand.
If I might interject, I think I understand exactly what you're trying to do, and I actually, I do agree that, I mean, that particular fund has a long name, and it also has a long history that has nothing to do with what we're trying to appropriate these funds for. So I think you're on the right track, quite honestly, with having a separate fund, a clean slate, and I think it would actually be more confusing to the voter to put it in that dual-purpose fund as it exists today.
And I agree with what Dan said. Also, my personal point of view, I would see more risk in splitting this into two warrants, because you introduce the possibility that you get 150,000 and no place to put it, or a shiny new reserve fund that people vote down the money for. By putting it on one warrant, you're linking purpose and amount. And any other way you do it introduces, I think, a risk that you get something unworkable at the end of the day.
So. And of course, we did it from an iterative process where we said, okay, we're not going to put the school warrant on. We're not going to ask for the 1.2, but we really need the 150 to keep this motor going. And
Would it make any difference if the article was preceded by an article that closed and eliminated or just whatever, got rid of the dual-purpose fund?
Would you be dissolving that?
Yeah.
Transferring the funds?
got
I believe you have to have
36
a
bucks in it,
warrant to transfer the
300
funds from one
it's got
balance to another.
$3,200.
But I believe you need a warrant article to transfer from one
Well, we
fund
could
to
do that.
another.
We
and
could do
dissolve.
that.
All say we?
Well,
Sounds
I-
Do it? Because I
Hang on, guys.
I think what was just said about the history of it, that's what we were trying to
Yeah, that's,
avoid.
yeah.
And so if we did that as Article 7, let's say, and close that thing out, and then turned around in the next article that the voters will see, and propose to create this new one and put 150
Yeah,
in.
now we're
That's
going.
okay.
And by the way, the dual fund, most people don't understand anyway.
Right.
I mean, it was new last year, I think, wasn't it?
It was
Or-
mangled every single year. No.
Yeah.
But people that have been paying attention to the process, just to hate to be a devil's advocate as far as the history goes, if they've been following the process since 2007, we spent $500,000 on architectural and engineering fees. So whether or not you rename it or not, there are going to be those people out there that go, wait a second, again? How many times are we going to draw the same building?
Right.
And it's,
And that's going to happen. So whether or not you change it, for some of those, it's just going to still be,
yeah,
we're now spinning our wheels all over
and it's
again.
more than 500,000.
Because that was
Oh,
my question
absolutely.
is.
Oh, yeah.
The expansion of school facilities, if the land buy goes through, we'll have roughly $8 and change left.
Right.
The dual purpose has 32.40, 32.37. So if you were to wipe those out, because they're essentially going to be nothing left in them as it is, but I mean, I think that's part of it is just trying
good
to
thought.
unmuddy the waters a little bit so we have very clear direction.
Good
Because
thought.
I think there's too much out there where it's like, oh, we're just doing another fund.
Yep.
But to your point, Nathan, if we closed out that
Yeah.
one, that might make it a little clearer that we're dissolving this one and this is our new focus.
And I think what the board will consider is we'll put the language together to do that. We won't try to transfer.
We have
any-
time to do that and vote on it based on the constraint, that would be
It
my
won't
other
be a money
question
article
is.
because so it doesn't, you know what I mean? Obviously, you guys want to be able to weigh in on everything as much as you can, but I don't,
We have until Thursday, the 21st, to
That won't be
recommend all articles.
think that one won't be an appropriation because we won't be raising anything. This would be the appropriation, but let's say it becomes 8 and we'll stick in the dissolving of that as 7.
Yeah.
And I don't think that we would ask to transfer the money or do anything with it. Whatever the 3,200 or so that's in there, it would simply go back to tax, it'll just drop to the fund balance, go back to taxpayers. Because it won't be, it won't be used. We'll just simply dissolve the fund and the money will go back.
Yeah.
That way we're not raising or transferring or doing anything more that becomes complicated. We're just closing it out.
Thank you for the help.
Feels like you're taking a two chunks, right, to close one out, to open another. The question before is, do we think that the language in Article 7 is written is confusing, therefore we should break it into two, and then also close out a third? I don't know if it makes sense to make a motion to see what we think as a budget committee would consider if it's confusing or not. Do we think people can understand that this is a new fund that we will fill with money to do the specific purposes of coming up with, moving the basic process forward? Does it make sense to just do any kind of polling and see where we sit on this? And then that saves the time and the potential risk that we miss that 21st
I
January.
think doing
21st
another
date.
7, I mean, that for me solves the problem that it isn't quite as dual as it seems now, because we're ditching another fund. I think that's eliminating questions right there, so.
Sure, that the fund that we would ditch is not necessarily pointed at what we're trying to make this $150,000 do.
That's correct.
It might build
But in people's
confidence,
perception,
but to
it
Dan's
is.
point, we might find money with nowhere to put it.
In the absence of any vote or any action, I think what the board's walking away with this consensus is that an Article 7 newly introduced would dissolve 1, and this one would stay as it is, but as 8. going back to the comment that was made, that Dan made, that we might end up with a shiny new, nothing to put in it, or we might end up with an appropriation nowhere to go, so.
And I think that's to the point that if you split it, I don't know if it has to be split, but if we're dissolving the one, I think that answers some questions in this one, personally.
Yeah, I don't think you need to split
Yeah.
if you dissolve.
Yeah, I think if you dissolve, that solves a lot of the issues that people might see for this one.
Well, I'm looking at all of you and seeing heads, Bob. Mickey's not necessarily saying that because he's sitting on the table, but is there anybody that thinks at this point we ought to split? Well, I don't want to point you out, but I mean, we could talk, we can take that, but right now it sounds like you're all in consensus that don't split, dissolve.
I think Nathan just took a vote for us.
Yeah.
That's what it looked like I was seeing lots of heads.
Well, I mean, we'll vote to recommend and not recommend all these after we get through all the public comment session, but I think, we're gonna then have to regroup some
For the
for
new
that,
seven.
that other one to recommend or not recommend, because
get
it has to
language
be
on
done
that
by
tomorrow morning.
Thursday.
Can I ask one more question about this? So is this really an option? It's not a guarantee. So if you have exactly 150,000 in the surplus, is it a requirement that you put all 150,000 in this new fund, or is it an option to put up to 150,000?
No, the way that's written, if approved, because there's no other fund balance article in the ballot, on the warrant, the first 150,000 of fund balance would go to
Any
that
fund
purpose.
balance.
Must.
Yeah. If there was only 100,000 of fund balance, the whole 100 would go.
If there was zero, would there be no fund?
There would be.
Correct.
No, I think if well, I don't know.
If
Lawyer
there's
would have-
zero fund
it'll
balance,
create
there's
It'll
nothing
create
there.
the fund, but put nothing in it,
Right.
assuming a positive vote.
Last question. If it fails, does this have no means, no consequences, or is it just you're not allowed to have a
I'm
fund?
not allowed to have a fund.
Thank you.
It's just one more point on that. Presuming it is fully funded at 150, that doesn't mean we're going to use it all.
Spend it all, right.
Either. So that's an important point. The board still has its obligation to oversee that. It's just an estimate.
And would you foresee continuing to use this fund for purposes like this in 2017, 18, and so on?
I think the board's desire is to complete this public conversation and move us to a point where a bond article on the ballot would address many of the things we've talked about tonight, including both facilities, the elementary, the conversation we just had about are we using that property, that Article number 6, are we using that or not? If so, what's it going to take? I think we're talking about all-encompassing, so my hope, that's just me, I can't speak for the whole board, but my hope would be that we wouldn't be looking to stick more money in there. This really serves today's purpose.
Got it. So the goal, not for this coming March, but for the March after, is to have some solutions that encompass the entire school system, not just junior, senior, high school, elementary school, but the whole thing, so the need for that fund would be no longer at that point.
Almost every endeavor that I'm aware of that the board has undertaken in the last couple of cycles, the last 2 years, including the Joint Advisory Committee conversation, the listening sessions that members of the board came on and did with people in the community, the public forums, one of the takeaways has clearly been, if you're going to do it right and do all of it. Do both schools, both sites, both facilities. Make sure that we set ourselves up and we're not turning around again in any number of small years for more. So, yeah, I agree. I think that's where we're
Okay.
headed.
So, but not even the chance of being a step-by-step process year over year where that fund may come in handy?
It could. I mean, I think if the going through the summer, the work the facilities committee is doing, if the board heard that was inappropriate, that we should stair step, or find some other way to baby step into it, or then obviously it could be for that purpose.
Okay.
Yeah.
I said I was done, but I'm sorry, I have one more. If this isn't funded at 150,000 or close, do you lose a year? Like, if it's only $1,000 in surplus for some reason, would that hamstring you that much?
Yeah, I mean, we floated, I mean, if you're watching the board meetings and you look at the board packets we put out there, a couple of iterations of this document carried 100,000 in that line as opposed to 150. Because we were waiting on Mike to get back from Ingrid as the expert that we could lean on. What do you anticipate the cost might be? How much for this kind of engineering? How much for an estimator, et cetera? And we arrived at 150. I think right now the board feels, based upon the recommendation from Ingrid and the itemization that we were given, that that's a decent number that should get us where we need to go. Something less than that will make it difficult, or more difficult than it would otherwise have been. No money would make it measurably more difficult. So
And one last question, where are we trending right now as far as the surplus is concerned for the 2015?
That was a conversation I should have said earlier, that when we envisioned this conversation, rather than raising and appropriating from new taxes, we talked to the business administrator and the superintendent, and essentially the board asked, where do you think we're going to be? And then directed, take steps to make sure that we hit a point so that we can clear 150,000 and still reasonably see our fund balance in the $300,000 or $400,000 range like it has been in previous years. Not the outlier years, but the.
No, but the
No,
last 2 years, we've been within, let's say, 3%, 3 point, so that's roughly, between 300,000 and 450,000 is where we've been the last 2 years. So if we
Get us-
stay on that
It's
trend,
in that ballpark.
if we come in within 2%, that's 300,000 of the budget. So, if you come in within 2%, kudos, but if we do, that still has that room there.
Exactly. So that's essentially what we asked. Can you do it? Good. Please do it.
It kind of goes along with this article. You also have the special fund, emergency fund. Are you choosing to do this instead of, or are you choosing possibly to do both and fund both funds? That's rather redundant.
Sounds like you're asking about that up to 2.5% of net
Yes.
assessment.
Yes. Would this be above and, if the board decides to do that, or has the board been talking about putting anything into that
We
fund?
had some conversation this last cycle about, should we try it? Should we use it? Should we use it as an experiment to learn about it with something small? Should we use it intentionally to help? And I think that was a conversation that we didn't have sufficiently with the council and the town administrator and the finance officer working together. We need to do that better, because I think it's important for us to be working in cahoots on that so that we know why we'd be holding back something with that vehicle.
Okay.
So right now, the board, like I said, we just came through that conversation with the June 30 of 15 fund balance and didn't exercise that, didn't use it, put all the money back. And I think that this 150 makes it less likely, based upon what the projections are, that we would have funds to use that vehicle on. But obviously, the board won't, I can't know that until we get to June, and
Sure.
obviously, if the fund balance, for whatever reason, were 600,000 or 700,000, then maybe there'd be an opportunity. But again, I think what we've got to do is be talking with the town side more to talk about why we would exercise that.
Thank you.
Anything
other
else
questions?
about all of that? Yeah, anything that,
Mine is actually about the operating budget. All the way back to Article 2. What will it read on the ballot? Article 2, what will the actual reading of and words on I've always found, and the reason why I'm asking this, I've always found it confusing that you're requesting $16,847,926 for an operating budget of fiscal year 17. And that's because we have the food services and the federal funds included in that. When you turn around and you go to the next page, you're actually going to be, because they're, the way I calculate it, first in, first out, they're even in, even out, you're really raising and appropriating $16,062,526. But that's not on the actual warrant article, is it, that number?
No, there's an RSA that requires us to gross appropriate, so what it means is that we need to have the authority to spend. So in order for us to spend money and to take money from the federal government, we have to have that authority, so we have to gross appropriate the larger number first, and we have to show it that way. So that's why you see the 16,000,008 and not the 16 million.
I just, year after year, I've seen that, and I probably asked and forgot about it again. It's just an $800,000 difference, and to the layman person going out there, oh my God, it's 16.8. Well, really, it's 16.
It is,
know.
and if you go to the blue sheet, you can see how it all ties in, because you'll see that the $335,400 for the food service and the $450,000 that we anticipate for our grants, you'll see it in the expenditure in the top, and then you see it in the revenues that it nets out.
It's just more for the common voter coming in, bottom line.
I agree with you.
You look at
Yep.
the bottom line, and they're looking at a number that is $800,000.
But if I don't authorize that, then I can't spend it.
I agree.
Well, and if you're really only looking at the bottom line, it's actually 11,144,000.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Correct.
yeah, so,
But it takes some educating.
yeah.
Are there any other questions? Article 8 is just to conduct any other business which would come forth. So, other than that, that's all the warrant articles that the school district
Would that go
has.
to 9, Christine, now, if we add the, if we
Yes.
add the one? Yeah,
Yep.
okay.
Yeah, they'll bump down. So,
Any more questions on the articles?
We all, Mike?
I have one question, and it might just because I got a C in English, but there's a question mark at the end of 16,847,926. Is that supposed to be there?
that's the language in which the requires. That also is just so anybody who's watching at home, the 18,847,000 ultimately is the budget committee's number.
Okay.
So, just as one other clarification.
18 million, you said?
16,847,000.
okay.
Did I
That
say
will come
18?
out in the final version once we approve that question mark comes out,
That would be the
correct?
budget committee's number. No, the question mark stays.
All right. Anything else? We clear? Okay. I would like to open it up to public comment. If there's anyone that would like to make any public comments, please step up to the microphone, introduce yourself and your address, and Tony?
Hi, Tony Weinstein, 275 Ash Swamp Road, and I just have a few comments. First of all, it's kind of nice to have public comment after you guys have asked all your questions, because I don't have to be redundant, and you gave me some food for thought in a few things. So, just a few things. First, I wanted to say that I just support the CBA, and am grateful to both sides for the work that they did on it. I wish that we were in the top 10% for what we pay our teachers. I wouldn't say number one, but if we could be in the top 10, it would be great. Maybe someday we'll get there. Article 6. The wording is confusing to me. And so it says, shall the school district vote to raise and appropriate the sum of 169,610 for the purchased property, yada, 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 and further authorize the withdrawal of 71,400? Is that
That's where the
double
funds are
dipping?
coming from.
okay? So it's, and that's clear, because I don't know that that's
Yes.
clear to me.
It wasn't clear to me originally, and that's why I thought they were asking for 250,000.
Yeah.
So I had to read it 3 times to,
I think that may take some clarification to the general public in order to understand that, because if I was standing in the voting booth, I would think that I was voting for 169 plus 71,400. So,
If it said something like, and pay for that by authorizing withdrawal from this and raising this?
I think it
Well, it
needs
does.
some sort of language,
It
does
This
it?
boilerplate.
So,
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, I should put my glasses on.
So the article does say, so the appropriation is the 169,610, and then it says to authorize further the 71,400 from the expansion of school facilities capital reserve fund created for the purpose in March 1962, with a balance of 98,210 to come from general taxation. So that's why your tax impact is only the 14 cents. So if you want,
It's confusing.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'll tell
I
you,
understand it.
the word that got me was further. That's why I
Yeah.
looked at it and thought addition,
right,
as opposed to,
I agree.
That's a fair point, in the pay-for language, it seems appropriate.
So just something to consider. I also fully support dissolving the dual-purpose fund, so I think that that's a fair compromise. And then my other question is about the operating budget, and specifically about technology in the district. And I'm curious, I don't know who exactly would answer this question, but what our overall plan for the district is for technology. And I can't speak to the junior, senior high, but I know that at the elementary school, it really feels like a hodgepodge of technology itself and then the resources to pay for it. I sit on the board of NCEP, and I know that many of the requests that we get, if not the majority, are for technology. I know that private citizens have bought iPads for classrooms, and maybe that's unwanted. I don't know, from a district perspective, but I would love to get some information about what the plan is for the district. Because again, there might be kids who are exposed to iPads in kindergarten, but the third grade doesn't have any. and then the 5th grade has a bunch. And so it just seems really disjointed to me. Thanks.
Any other comments? All right, then we will close the public comment session. And I guess at this point, I think we have to have a little bit of discussion. So we can go through each one of these warrant articles and we can talk about them and vote on them. Obviously now, if we're going to add the dissolving of the dual purpose fund, we're going to have to still reconvene to vote on that. So rather than just do this disjointed, do we want to try to reconvene next Monday? And I mean, it can be a quick 20 minutes, 25 minutes and vote on all the articles. Because from the sounds of it, there's going to be some editing and there might be some things in here that the language might be changed and we might be recommending something based on language that could change. And I don't know if I feel comfortable doing that. I mean, how do you guys?
I would also like to see, I guess on only Article 1, do we have the school board's input? I mean, that's the only one that they voted on or approved to some extent. So I would like to see how they vote on all the other warrant articles before I make a decision on
we
you know,
don't-
how I feel.
The hard part about
They're not scheduled to
they're not
meet again.
scheduled till the 21st. We have to have all our recommendations and our budgets posted and approved by the 21st. So we're on a real tight timeline here. But just based on a lot of the conversation tonight and some of what's been added or some suggestions have been made, I can see some language changing. I don't know how comfortable I feel about recommending or not recommending if this is not the final version. Amy?
Because Mike's right here, I know Nathan just left. Is there a possibility for the school board to, based on what happened here, I know you guys didn't forward any recommendations other than a couple, is there a possibility that the school board could meet, get this language straightened out, actually do your votes and recommendations for us to meet next Monday?
Got 4 of them here.
Next Monday's a holiday. Oh, it's Martin Luther.
I'm not sure, Christine, if you said anything different. I mean, the idea Amy suggests is that we meet and then they meet to vote on them.
I don't care if it's next Monday, but.
Then the school board will want to meet again to take another vote on Article 1. Ultimately, the budget committee's number is the number that goes.
Article 2.
I mean, sorry, Article 2.
Okay, I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not changing anything on one.
Yeah.
No, so Article 2, the operating budget. So if there were to be any changes to that number, then the school board would want to have another meeting to think that was.
Yeah, I guess for tonight, let's talk to we'll talk to the chair, Amy, and we'll get back, Dan, I guess, through you, and because I can't speak for him.
Can we not meet next Monday? I mean, is there, I don't.
Well, we can't,
holiday, but town hall.
the town hall's closed because of Civil Rights Day, Martin, so we can't, so it'll have to be Tuesday night if we do.
Got a key.
All
right, Tuesday night.
I guess what I'm trying to do is expedite this and help this out for both parties. I think, to get the recommendations and stuff like that as fast as possible. I mean, to your point, Christine, if they meet, let's say they can meet this week and we meet next week, you already had a meeting scheduled for the 21st. So it would just be, then you would have to
That's
revisit
true.
it then on the 21st. It's just, that's kind of the drop dead day where things have to be done. So on our end, we have to have our recommendations or non-recommendations and the budget approved before next Thursday, the 21st. Dr. Martin, yeah.
I just want to say, the board voted unanimously in favor of this warrant. I don't know if my name is correct.
Which one?
The warrant that we brought to you tonight. The warrant articles.
All 8 of them?
All 8 of them.
No.
Because it's not listed on all
They
8,
didn't.
that there's some where it has
In
no,
what meeting did it occur?
They approved the slate in the second. Did you know that?
No.
Was it in the board document?
No.
I know the only one that I saw at the meeting that was recommended was the actual operating budgets and the teacher's contract. And after that, then the rest were still, I mean, I know some of the dialogue even probably changed a little bit right up before this meeting, so, and I think we've changed a little bit of it.
To me, it feels like, rather than have the historical record, rather than having 2 meetings to go back and look at, we're better to identify a date when we can all regroup.
Yeah.
And just do one vote straight through.
Yep.
And I don't know people's schedules, but Tuesday works for me too.
Tuesday's fine.
So do I have a motion on the table to reconvene Tuesday, the 19th?
I'll make that motion to the budget committee to reconvene on Tuesday, 19th.
Do I have a second?
Second?
All those in favor? Say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right, then it's unanimous. So we will meet Tuesday, the 19th.
6:30?
Yeah, 6:30.
Thank you.
I will work with Wendy to see if that counters any other meetings that are happening that night.
19th?
If not, we'll find a little cubby somewhere if we have to, a little room just to vote on it. I mean, I think it's that simple.
Well, we'll have to have AV for it though, right?
6:30. Yeah.
We'll figure it out. I'll get with Wendy. We'll figure it out. Any other questions on that then? So we'll reconvene next Tuesday and recommend, approve all that other budgets. Good? Okay. Any other questions tonight then? Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
You want to second it?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Before you all run away, I just need those that voted on the town budget to stick around and sign it. We have to get this back to Steve.